So one of the reasons we use this compost as kind of a mulch layer and we don't till it in or incorporate it like some other folks do is we find that it's kind of like an added weed preventative. So it prevents some of those like little annual weeds that are right on the surface of the soil from getting through and competing with our crops. And it also, you know, like last year we had some pretty bad drought conditions, but we found that the beds that had this sort of compost mulch layer on top retained a lot more moisture. So we weren't having to irrigate as much. And then obviously, you know, you have the added benefit of the nutrients that are coming from the compost whenever it rains. You know, those are leaching down and getting taken up by the roots of your crop, which is important to us because, you know, compost is not free. It costs money. It's labor intensive to do this step. So, you know, those are all three things that are really important to us. And that's why we continue to do it this way. We get our compost from Calmar Compost. They're a dairy cow manure based compost, and we usually get it delivered in the fall so like this compost we're using now was delivered in the fall of last year. And the main reason we do that is just because we get a semi-trailer load, and in the springtime, sometimes conditions on the farm can be pretty wet. So in order for ease of the truck driver getting in and out and then not having to tear up the roads that we're gonna have to use all season, we find it better to get it in place in the fall. We usually cover it with a large silage tarp to prevent snow and rain, you know, from leaching all those lovely nutrients away. And then, yeah, we reveal it and all its glory in the spring and start applying it on the fields.
So we use kind of a deep compost mulch system, kind of adapted from what you see at an urban garden. And so what we do is first I rototilled this block, and then I marked the beds with our tractor tires so that we have 48-inch wide beds. And then we grab our tractor with the bucket on it and we fill it with a big heaping load of compost. This helps us so that we aren't shoveling compost from the pile into the wheelbarrow and then dumping it out over here. This kind of eliminates just one step and turns it into a tractor task where we can use the tractor to load compost into the buckets. And then the only thing that we're doing by hand that's like kind of heavy manual labor is dumping compost out onto the bed. And that's the most economical system that we've found at this point, and it makes a lot of sense for the scale that we're at right now. So then I kind of just try to dump this in little piles. They definitely don't need to be perfect because we come back and rake it out later. And we do 6 wheelbarrows per bed. That probably gives us like an inch of compost really evenly across the top. Whereas like in an urban garden, you might see people do as many as 6 inches, which wasn't economical for our particular scale.
Now that we've dumped these piles out, we kind of talked about how often you'll get some of these clumps of compost in the pile, and we find that just an average garden rake or bow rake, whatever you call it, works really well to just kind of quickly and easily break up those clumps. And then Carly will follow along behind me with the bed rake or landscape rake, which is really good for leveling the surface of the bed, making it nice and flat, and after that it's pretty much ready to plant. As we're raking it out, we try to be mindful that we're leaving sort of an even layer of compost to serve that weed barrier purpose that I talked about earlier. So we want to try and not leave any of the native soil exposed so that the compost mulch can do its job of actually being that mulch layer, which is another reason that we break it up, because the compost goes a lot farther if you can break it up into smaller pieces.
What we really like about this system is it kind of helps our farm kind of navigate a space between no-till and low-till. And so what we do is we plant the onions, The onions grow in this space from April until August when we harvest them. And then we have a little gap in our crop plan where we can put a tarp over this area if we have time and space to do that. Or ideally, if we can keep this area weed free enough, we can go right into the next crop. And that's kind of another thing adapted from an urban garden. And that really helps us get the most value as we possibly can out of these beds. So this area will go from harvested onions into fall small brassicas, so things like daikon radishes, purple top turnips, watermelon radishes, things like that. And then ultimately it will go back into rye at the end of the year. And we'll start the process again, we'll till in the spring, and then just do one no-till bed flip per season.